Hi, welcome back to the Busy Corner. This is lesson 23. I think it would be great to show you how to make a cat bed today. Here's what you do. Take anything you've knit out of Woolly's yarn, lay it on your desk, voila, instant cat bed. It's like totally unnecessary to do a pattern. I sat here one day fantasizing about this cat bed I was going to knit and realized that my cat Mitch has totally taken over this scarf I'm going to show you. So I just thought that would be kind of funny and you would like that. All right, come here, Mitchie. Off you go. Oh, guy hates that. Good key. Oh, orange cats are always the best, aren't they? Okay, come on. Out, out, out. Come on, Lily. Okay. In all seriousness, what I'm going to show you how to do today is how to do a cable. Now, this is what I've been working on. And you're going to have to use your imagination. But this is, I'm turning this into a long, fat scarf with pockets. And the upper part is from a Lion brand pattern for a humongous scarf. But I only did part of it. And this bottom part, I added, and you can see this row stockinette stitches. That's why I didn't finish it. That stockinette at the midpoint of the garter stitch section will help that fold up and lay flat there. Then I'll stitch that together to form my pocket. And you'll see that I have what's called in French a roll U. I think that's how you pronounce it. This takes advantage of the tendency of stockinette to roll over. So I want to thank alert viewer and friend of the Busy Corner, Sandy. She sent me this very cool pattern. I was looking at it totally backwards and it had me messed up for about a week. So I've done my roll U though in the opposite way, and you'll see that this tapers, and the reason is I started to use smaller pipes at that point. If you didn't, this would be way too fat. Now, you don't have to make yours with 2 strands of woolies like I did here. The only reason I did it that way is so you'll be able to see how to do the cable on the rods. I thought you might not see if it was only one. So you could do it all on the small pipes. This is all done on the 15s, and this top one I did on the other new size, the 19s. So let's get started. This is going to be a long video. By the way, this is a very unusual cable, I think. Here, let me hold it so it's not... Almost looks like wishbones, which I love. It reminds me of something kind of Celtic about it. And I'm even thinking that once I fold the pockets up, where I have that little bit of a taper. And by the way, you wouldn't have to have that taper. If you want to keep the top part full and have this in the garter, and remember, it's going to stretch. Garter stitch stretches more than any other. You see, when I put my hands in there, or I have something in my pocket, it's going to stretch out. So you want to make sure this is a little tighter. It's only one strand here. I drop a strand when I get to this point. But I'm even thinking I'm going to take my taper there, where I sew that up to right there, and hang some tassels off this edge. Or you could cast on a couple extra stitches when you got that, if you wanted to leave this part fat. I like the way that looks, and I'm thinking I'm going to put a back on it too. But anyway, this is just mostly to show you a whole bunch of techniques in terms of transposing this pattern. This is Lion brand. Here's the other thing you could do with this. It was meant to be this huge scarf. They call it Jumbo Cable Scarf using Vanna's Choice yarn. And it called for 24 balls of yarn, holding 8 strands together in US 35 needles, which are the 1/2-inch size of needles, the ones that are on your rod stands, that the arms are made out of. So you could make a throw out of this. Usually you're used to seeing cables, by the way, that look like this. And this is going to be a throw. And this is going to be another video, probably not till after the holidays. I want to stitch up the sides and see what they look like. And I'm using 5 strands of Caron 1-pounder together, 5 strands together. And this is just an old cable I found in my knitting book. But this is a very traditional cable, but it's a front cable only, and I wanted to be able to show you both. And that's why I picked the weird wishbone design. But I think that's going to look really cool. And but anyway, normally when you see cables, it's in a ground of something very simple, like garter stitch. The other thing you should be aware of when you're doing cable on the rods, it's going to look better if it's a tighter stitch. I started doing this with, and you can see this is on the 1/2-inch rods, started doing this with 4 strands, but it wasn't tight enough with the 4 strands, and you couldn't see the design. So anyway, so what we're going to do is use this jumbo cable pattern here, and I will put the pattern number in my description. Like I said, you could do it just like I did. It was meant to be a humongous scarf. The finished size of this originally was 14 inches wide and 110 inches long, and it called for 24 balls of yarn, and I didn't want to go that route. And I wanted the little pocket thing. I might even put a hood on that thing and add a back, but you get the idea. It's going to be more like a vest, I think, by the time I get done with it. So anyway, that'll be in the description. Now, it's 20 stitches, and again, I did 2 strands, so I've already put on my 20 stitches, and I've done the first part of the pattern. And you'll see when you get your pattern online that you knit 4 rows. That's the first thing you do. So I knitted a row with front stitches, then I back stitched a row, then I knit a row, then I back stitched a row, and now I'm back here to this pipe. Now, you want to make sure that when you go to work your cable, it's going to be on the right side. Most cable patterns are meant to work on the right side. So if you need to, when you see a cable pattern, like this one here, the one in the basket, the gray one I showed you, I actually had to change the pattern to make sure I was working my cable on this pipe. So, now we're ready to start the actual cable portion. And cable, that part of the pattern will be numbered 1 through 8, like the gray one, or this one is 1 through 10. So now we're going to begin this. And as we go along, we'll keep stopping the camera and we'll come back and da-da-da. So I'll show you how to do the whole thing. If you want to do it this way. You don't have to. But you'll learn a lot of skills if you watch the whole video. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so now reset your counter. You did your first 4 rows. And now you're going to do rows 1. And you'll notice on your pattern, it'll say rows 1, 3, 7, and 9. This is the right side. So every of those numbers, you do the same. So, let's turn around here. And this is all pretty simple. You know the routine for this. So you always want to keep your pattern, and I like to have something to kind of mark my pattern off like this. Because I cannot remember from row to row what that is supposed to be. But I know that this is row 1, okay? I got my counter set to row 1, and I got this little pad of paper there right underneath those directions so that you can't get messed up. I did not roll my balls together. I just have them loose in my bin here. And the first thing it says is K2, so those are 2 front stitches. So that's the first one. That's the second one. Now it says P2, which means back stitch 2. And I'm going to kind of whiz through this. This is going to probably be a 2-parter, this video. Now it says K to last 4 stitches. This is where I always get messed up. As soon as I start, my mind wanders. So here's what I've been doing. You know, I start thinking about what I'm making for dinner or whatnot. I go to those last 4 stitches and I just take this, which is a cable needle, and put it over my pipe so that when I see that purple thing, when I get there, I know to stop knitting. Otherwise, I just keep knitting and then I have to undo the last 4. So it says K to last 4. That means knit, and that means front stitches. And I got my purple thing up there so I can't lose track of what I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm totally helpless. Although I should show you how to undo some stuff, because I kept doing that with this. It's too many stitches in a row. Alright. You're going to whiz right through those. And I made my stitches fairly firm on this, especially when I got to the pockets. So this is unlike a lot of the things you want to do on your rods, because in order for that cable to really show, it needs to be a little tighter. So there's K to the last 4 stitches. Now it says P2, which means purl 2, which means back stitch 2 on this rod. It's my odd number. There's 1. It's my right side. There's my 2. And now do 2 more K. K2. Alright. There you go. Now you're going to find that's pretty well packed on there. Now, next it says, oops, row 2 and all WS rows. That means wrong side rows. Now, my pattern says K4. well, I know I have to do the reverse. So instead of K4ing, I'm going to, which is knit 4, I'm going to backstitch 4 or purl 4. Remember, I have to reverse it. So off comes my stitch. You notice on these where I have a little more space on my pipe, I stick my finger through there and basically hook it. Not all the time, but I mean that's generally how I make those. If I have enough space for my finger, I think it's easier to do that. So K4, which was purl 4. Now it says P to last 4 stitches, so they mean for me to purl to last 4 stitches, but I know I need to knit them. I'm on my even side, I'm on the wrong side. So now, oh here, let's put this guy in again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because I know I'm going to forget. You want to be careful you're not poking your yarn too much when you do that, but what am I doing here? Alright, see it said purl, so I know I need to knit those. Again, if you don't want to use 2 strands for this, if you don't want it bulky, just do 1 strand, but you're going to need to use the small rods for the whole thing, these tiny ones. You know, that's some work. This pattern is not a quick make, but I think it's going to look really cool when I'm done. I'm kind of excited about this. You're going to love this, the cable. You should not be afraid of cables. I've always been afraid of cables. I had never done cables before I did this. So it's easy breezy. So, a couple more. I think this oatmeal is, this color of this woolies is really pretty for the scarf too. And Joann's always has a ton of it in stock. Alright, take that off. Now it says K4. Well, that means knit, but I got a purl, remember? So here I am. And I'm going to do 4 of those. I know you know how to do all this, so I'm kind of making it fast. I hope that's alright. Now it says, so you've got to go back now to my row 3. Row 3. So here we go. So, now I knit 2, because that's what it told me to do. You can push that stitch down a little bit. And purl 2. This is one of the rows where you do exactly what the pattern says, because it's an odd number row. And now it says knit to last 4 stitches. Let's put our marker in there so we don't lose track. And again, with the pockets, you're going to want, you know, there's going to be some stretch to this. Whenever you see a pattern that has any garter stitch in it, they will often make the pattern, and you make it, you might think, well, gee, this is a little short. It won't be once the garter stitch stretches out. So you need to take that into consideration when you are, especially if it's something you're going to wear, when you're transposing a pattern. Like here, I'm not just transposing, I just like that motif. And I said, that would be perfect for my lesson and to go along with the Alert Viewer Sandy pattern. So, now, there's those. And now I purl 2, so off comes my little purple marker. Now, I knit 2. Okay, that was row 3. Now row 4 is back to the even side. Click my clicker. It says knit 4, so I know I have to purl 4. I have to do the opposite. This is my wrong side. And remember, if you're working a pattern that is meant for circular needles, you won't need to do this, because that assumes you're always working the wrong side. Now it says P to last 4. Now again, I'm knitting because it's my wrong side. Can you see? Alright. I always lean over like that, like I gotta see right into the stitch. I have bad eyes. Okay. I forgot to put my thing up there, but we're just going to keep knitting and hope I remember when I get there. tend to pull hard on my stitches, so I usually make my pipes move around. I probably pull it a little too firmly, really. It doesn't need to be that hard. But, as I said, when you work a cable pattern, you will want it fairly dense or the cable won't show, and it'll just look like a mess. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I do one more of these. Okay, now it says knit 4, but we purl them instead. Now I don't have trouble when I'm just holding 2 strands like this. I don't have trouble with it twisting up. I didn't have any problems with that. Alright, now that takes us up to row 5, and this is where all the exciting things happen. Now, so click your clicker. 5. Now, this is where we do our cables, and every cable is different. Your pattern will tell you how it wants you to work the cable. So, this one begins the row with some knit and purl stitches, and it wants us to K2. So, here's our knit and knit 2. Now, purl 2. Now, you see this direction. It says 3/3RC. So, that is, you'll see in the definition up above that, it says slip, that's what the SL is, slip 3 stitches, STS, lowercase s, stitches to cable needle and hold in back. Okay, now, I did a variety of things. This is what a cable needle is. It comes in a variety of sizes. Or this. I found what worked best for me was a pin for my back cables. So here's how I did this, because you want to keep them straight. You don't want to get them mixed up. Take your pin and stick it right in the hole of your pipe. And what I'm going to do is take these 3 stitches off. So there's 1, 2, 3. Now, clip it and just let it hang, okay? Because you're going to knit these first 3. And it's all right if this flies around. Here's what you got to watch out for. Your first stitch, and you can move these a little closer together if you want. You need to snug this up real good. And if you don't, that's where you get the holes in cabling. People talk about this all the time. Why does my cable have a big hole? It's because you got to snug that up. And if you see on this, you know, there is that opening under the cable, but you don't see a big hole in my knitting. Why? Because I really pull that tight. So let me show you what I mean. So now I'm ready to make my first stitch and off the cable. So I'm going to take off this stitch. Now you'll see that when I go to make this, it's almost that you watch that you don't get your yarn around the cable pin. So let your cable hang down and take off again. I got my yarn here, my cable is underneath. I'm going to take off and knit 3, but first I'll knit 1. And when you make this stitch, make sure that you snug this up tightly so that these stitches are touching. And this is where most people get their holes, is they don't have that snugged up. So you're going to make 3. And I snugged mine up pretty firmly all along there. Now, you'll see that for the cable pattern, K3, those were the 3. Now this says knit 3 from cable needle. Now, before I did this on the rods, I read several articles about cabling. And everybody said the easiest thing to do when you're going to knit these now is put them back. So, now watch. You're going to unpin your pin. And you're going to put it back in the hole just like it was. And you want to make sure, see, you don't have them crossed. And remember, each one is 2 strands. So the one goes back, the middle one goes back, and now the first one goes back. They have to be in order. If you cross them, you're messed up. That's the best way of doing it, and you won't drop the other 2. Just put them back on the pipe. Now, go back and knit those, the ones that were on the cable needle, and this is what creates the twist. And this one, again, pull that firmly. Don't be afraid to give that a good wank. And that's another reason you want the whole cable pattern, the whole design, to be tighter than you normally would. So now you've taken care of that cable. Now, you notice right after that, now it says 3/3 LC. Okay, now it wants me to slip 3 stitches to cable needle and hold in front. Now, I found the thing that worked for me the best was a frickin' pencil. You can use these just aren't, they're not long enough, they're not big enough. You can use a crochet hook if you want. It should be something smaller than the rod you're working on, not bigger, because that'll stretch your stitch. But I liked the pencil because here's what happens. So, it wants me to do that. Now I'm doing the other one, which is going to, whoops, oh, look what happened. Come back here. Anyway, you know, one of these is going one way and one of these is going the other. So that's why you have to do some in back and some in front. So here's what I did. Now I got to slip my 3 stitches. So stick your pencil in your hole, hold on to it, take off your stitch, take off another stitch. Don't let it drop off your pencil. Now, you got them on your pencil, work them between your rods and set it right there. You can push your stitches up and get ready. And just set him right there. I think that works better because it spans the distance. Make sure your yarn is here. Now, you knit 3 off this. And if this spins a little bit, sorry, just we don't want it to fall off. So you want to do the same thing with this cable pattern here. I mean, when you go to knit this stitch, you want to put it in there and you want to snug that up tight. Get back up there. You know, these never spin around if I'm just doing this by myself. Of course it's going to do it while I'm showing you. And again, do the same thing here. Knit these tight. Alright. Now, I've done my 3. Now it wants me to knit the 3 from the cable. Well, that would be pretty darn tricky. So now this is a little, you know, bear with me here. So now you've got your thing. Remember, my eraser was on this side. This is another reason I like the pencil. So, or you can use a knitting needle, whatever. But now take your pencil and move it back up towards your knitting rod. Take your stitch and re-pipe it. That's the back one. This is the middle one. This is the front one. You got to pull it pretty good. Okay? Now knit those 3. And again, you know, you see that I'm pulling on that pretty good. These will be tight when you knit the next row. Doesn't matter. Alright? Now you've done your 2 cables. You've done your front cable and your back cable. And that happens every row 5. Now it says purl 2. What you're going to do, you're going to do it as purl stitches, back stitches. Now that we're doing patterns, you're going to hear me use purl and knit more often than front and back. Because if you're transposing patterns, that makes more sense. And now you knit 2. Well, let's do another row before we turn the camera off. So, row 6, we have to go back up. So you notice that it goes row 5. That's what we just did. It says row 10. We were like, well, what happened to row 6? Well, remember, those are the row 2 and all wrong side rows. Okay, so we know we have to go back up to that WS. You could even write next to there, even. So I know now I have to purl 4. Whoops. Click that clicker. You're really going to need it when you do this. If you don't if you don't use something to mark your thing, you're going to be in trouble. When you start working patterns, you have to get used to using that thing. Sometimes I have to, when I'm writing out a pattern to transpose for these videos, I use 2. So I have a total row count and the row count for the section. Okay, now I'm going to knit 4 because it says to purl. I'm doing the opposite. Now these are pretty firm, remember. So you got to be careful that, and this row doesn't have to be so tight. You just were closing up the gaps on that last one. But we go to the last 4 stitches. And then I'll show you what we did. Remember, all your right side is facing away from you. You're standing at the other end of the knitting needles. Your orientation is the opposite. You would be facing this if you were doing this on knitting needles. It would, you know, it would be facing you. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got one more to do. I'll show you something else. So I can get the camera on here. Alright, you know I just did those as knit stitches, and I want you to notice something. Let's put that up there for now. See that little bump on the side? I know those were knit stitches. See those? They don't have that bump. Why? That bump is right there. So if you are kind of in your middle and you go, oh, did I do that as a purl stitch or a knit stitch? Just look down. When it's bigger like this, it's much easier to see. And if your bump is to the inside like that, on the left, you know that that was a purl. And if it's on the outside, you know that was a knit stitch. And now I purl 4. And then I'll show you what we got. 1. Alright. So that takes us through row 6. Let me make sure I have the right clicker. Okay. Now, so here's what we've got so far. And you can already see that's the pattern. Now, I liked, by the way, to do the garment, I liked that wishbone thing kind of coming down. But you wouldn't have to do it. I didn't like it the other way up. So, when you start the pattern, know that that's the way they're going to go. And you could turn this whole thing into an afghan. Do a panel afghan and sew these edges together. These are the bumps, what they call bumps in knitting on the garter stitch. And you want to join those. So, that's what you do every time on your row 5. And when we come back, we're going to start the next section.